Good morning, everyone. We're just waiting for everyone to connect.
I've just switched my phone off, so we won't get any more interruptions.
Yes, it's a good idea. I see the participants are checking in. We'll give it a couple more minutes before we start. Right. Well, good morning or good day, everyone, depending on where you're calling in from. So welcome to the ACE webinar, where we will try and explain what the ACE project is. And we have a panel of three people experienced in setting up community energy financing. So they will hopefully serve as inspiring examples to you. First, my colleague, my name is Chris Merveille. I'm at work at Goyaner, and my colleague Yosu will first give you an introduction of what the project ACE is and what a CEFS, a Community Energy Finance Scheme, is. And then we will have, like I said, three people from other community energy organizations presenting their experiences, their best practices. We'll have a question and answer session and discussion, which will also be open to you as participants. So if you have any questions, please, you won't be able to interrupt during the presentation, but you can go to the questions and answers section at the bottom of your screen and post your questions there. And we will attend, let's say, most of them, or try to attend most of them towards the end of this session. So the session will last for an hour and a half. And without further ado, I will pass the word to Yosu Naveda, my colleague. Yosu.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen for a moment. Okay. There you go. So yeah, I'm Yosu Naveda, and I'm the project manager in ACE for the Basque Renewable Energy Cooperative Goyener, such as Chris, which together with other European organizations forms the consortium of participants in the ACE project, which stands, as you can see on screen, for access to capital for community energy. The main objective of ACE is to facilitate access to finance for community energy projects. That is, projects carried out by energy communities for a just, socially, and environmentally responsible energy transition. The project is coordinated by the European Federation of Renewable Energy Cooperatives, which is RESCOOP, and has a total duration of 3 years, of which 1.5 already have been completed. The consortium involves 7 European organizations, all of them linked to the cooperative movement and with a clear social perspective on the energy transition. We also have the collaboration of the British organization Energy for All, a pioneer in designing financing schemes for energy communities in the UK, which Mark will tell us about its model in the next talk. As I mentioned earlier, the aim is to facilitate access to financing for community energy projects. And to this end, innovative financing schemes will be designed and implemented, which we will call CEFs, or Community Energy Financing Schemes. The design of these CEFs will be carried out by observing existing models in Europe in order to identify the best practices on those schemes. And while in parallel, ACE will also create a European intermediary organizations that will serve as a link between the CEFs created and the potential European investors, helping them to reach entities that otherwise would not be able to, given, of course, their local character. In this way, the aim is to activate citizen investment of 90 million euro to help finance projects in favor of just and democratic eco-social transition. Okay, so the first question we faced when we started ACE was related to the concept of community energy. What exactly makes a project a community energy project? Well, community energy projects are those led by energy communities mostly, and local actors, with the potential to provide direct benefits to citizens by increasing something like energy efficiency, lowering their electricity bills, and creating local job opportunities. But this also involves those energy transition projects that consider the most vulnerable people, as well as those projects that put emphasis on changing consumption habits, I mean for a reduction in this overall consumption. Precisely, the main advantage of this type of citizen initiatives over more, we could say, corporate-driven ones is the social impact they have at the local level, while citizens still retain control and decision-making authority. It is a sustainable social model without seeking individual financial gain, we would say, still manages to bring economic benefits to the region. A study in 2019 revealed that for every euro invested in community energy projects, 2.5 euros are returned to the local economy, while another study highlighted the need for citizen investment to meet EU climate targets, which could amount up to 32% of RES share by 2030, which is quite a lot for the private citizen investments. When talking about financing of community energy projects, one of the important things to note is that the financing tools available vary depending on the stage of development of the project. If we take a quick look at the picture on screen, if in the last row, we can see how the initial phases are mainly financed by grants and equity from the partners, while the construction phase is mainly financed by bank loans. The reason for this is that, on the one hand, the early stages require less investment and therefore will have a lower expected return, while the risk of the project not going ahead is much higher than when it reaches the construction phase. Therefore, traditional investors or banks do not find it attractive to finance these less profitable initial phases, preferring to do so when the project is more established, we could say. Another obstacle that citizen-led projects tend to encounter is the lack of confidence that traditional investors have in the capacity of an energy community to carry out a project of a certain size. This is why alternative formulas are needed to provide them with this confidence. But what exactly differentiates a CEFs from other funding schemes? Well, we asked ourselves that very question with the project having started back in November 2022, and don't think it was easy to reach a consensus. After all, each of us understood community energy in its own way. But in the end, we agreed that in the absence of a concrete definition, we could identify the main dimensions to be analyzed in order to decide whether we were dealing with a CEFs or with another kind of scheme. These dimensions refer, among others, to the level of citizen participation, the origin of the funds, or the interest pursued by the CEFs with the investment. So the first dimension analyzed was the institution managing the CEFs. This means who manages, who makes the investment decisions, and with what degree of citizen participation are they made. The second dimension refers to the target investment. That is the type of project that the CEFs will finance, and again, the degree of citizen participation in these projects. So these two dimensions were graded based on the citizen empowerment in the funds management and control. And in order to measure this involvement, we would use Einstein ladder of engagement that you can see on screen, estimating this way the stage of involvement of citizens in the governance of the fund and the targeted projects. So as you can see in the picture, the ladder goes from 1 to 8, 1 being the lowest form of citizen participation or manipulation, and 8 being the highest one or full citizen control. But again, the third dimension analyzed focused on the origin of the funds and the interest pursued by the investment, whether it is the public or a private interest, or in other words, whether the investment pursues a social benefit or, on the contrary, a financial return. The fourth dimension corresponds to the type of product offered by the CEFs, which, as we have seen before, varies according to the stage of the project to be financed. Usually, the investment may be structured through grants, debt, or equity. And finally, the fifth and last dimension concerns knowledge sharing, meaning the existence or not of a knowledge sharing network between the CEFs and the funded projects. Okay, so if we take a look at the chronology of the project, we can see that over the 3 years, it will go through different phases. During the first phase, existing financing models in Europe were identified, and in parallel, the criteria to be considered CEFs were defined, which is the 5 dimensions we have seen before. And once this filter was applied, the models that met the criteria were added to the CEFs database, which is available on the project website. This process of identifying CEFs will continue to nurture the database even after the project is completed. On a second phase, it consisted of analyzing the strengths and weaknesses of the identified models and learning about the success factors and barriers they faced. In this way, the aim is to try to standardize as far as possible the process of setting up a CEFs. This resulted, again, in a best practice report, which, like the database, is available on our website for anyone interested on taking a look at it. Okay, so the knowledge gained through the project will also be used to develop a series of resources that will be integrated into a toolbox. And the next webinar on the project is planned to focus on this toolbox in a more exhaustive way. So stay tuned for more news about it. And finally, the last phases of the project will focus on shaping pilot CEFs in different parts of Europe, while at the same time setting up the previously mentioned European intermediary. The action plans for each of these pilot CEFs have already been drawn up, and the next steps will focus on creating suitable national framework while establishing contact with the relevant public and private institutions that will be involved in each of these CEFs. So yeah, as I said before, many of the lessons learned in the first phases of ACE are included in the best practice report, but the main conclusions drawn in it are the following. Just a quick snapshot on those. So firstly, the CEFs will struggle if the interests of the lead investors are not aligned with those of the fund managers. This means that every party involved must not only understand the risks and the expected profitability of community energy projects, but also be familiar with the social economy way of working and its decision-making processes that might take a longer time than corporate-driven ones. So this expectation alignment amongst the main participants must be monitored and readjusted if needed through the whole life of the CEFs. Also, that a strong structure is key for the survival of the scheme. So developing a strong business model together with a solid organizational structure that defines clear roles and responsibilities is key for the CEFs to be successful. It should also not try to cover more than the structure is capable of assimilating, because we shouldn't try to aim too high, especially in the first stages of the tool. Then a third best practice, a conclusion on the report, will be that providing support to project owners enables a better understanding of the project's needs and expectations, and also allows a better monitoring of their progress. It is important to keep track of the project's progress to assess the impact created in the community. And then last but not least, that knowledge sharing mechanisms, again, and collaboration among the involved parties allows expanding the limits of the scheme. Okay. And regarding the toolbox, again, a quick snapshot, because we are going to talk about this in the next webinar. That Chris is going to give us an agenda for the next webinars later on, I think. But a quick snapshot on what we can find in this toolbox and what's available in the project website already. So We have a self-management guide that provides advice and practical examples to help energy communities create financing tools dedicated to community energy projects. There is also a RES project development guide that identifies the main type of CEFs that energy communities could use and also describes the key characteristics and success factors for each of these CEFs. A financial handbook that facilitates the setup of a CEFs, and for doing so, it identifies the main barriers and the resulting bottlenecks and highlights solutions to overcome those barriers and transform obstacles into opportunities. And some CEFs business cases that provide on-the-ground insights, like real examples from CEFs that are already in operation and have an established track record and established business models. So yeah, okay, so having said this, that's all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any doubt, don't hesitate to visit our website on screen or write me an email or us. And we promise to answer as soon as possible. And now I leave you with Chris again to start the roundtable of successful examples. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Yosu, for this very interesting introduction to the project, to the basic concept of the projects, and also the findings that we've had during the first year and a half of this project. And as Yosu already mentioned, in the toolbox, there is a description of some of the best practices that we've encountered. And we're fortunate that we have 3 of these best practices here with us today, and that we can look at them. These people have got a lot of experience with their established CEFs, and they will share these experiences with us, and we hope to learn a lot from them. So first, I would like to present Merel Oldenburg from Energie Samen in the Netherlands. Merel is project manager at Energie Samen, where she has a focus on strengthening regional networks of energy communities and innovative financing instruments for citizen energy projects. So whenever you're ready, Merel, please go ahead.
Let me share my screen. Could you confirm if it's visible now?
It is indeed,
Yeah.
yes.
Perfect, okay. Thanks, first of all, for inviting me. I've been working with Chris and Yosu in the past 1.5 years in the ACE project. And for us, we have a role in the ACE project where we're focusing on sharing our current examples. Energie Samen is a Dutch federation of energy communities, and we have about 700 energy communities in the country. And we represent them on a national level, for example, on advocacy activities, but we also try to provide services that are only viable if they are on a large-scale services. And one of them is financing. So we have a financing team of 3 full-time people who work on financing for energy communities, and then a couple of part-timers, including myself, who also add to our financing activities. And our first ever CEFs was the Development Fund for Energy Communities. So currently we have a larger portfolio of CEFs, but for us, this is really the first one, and the one where we learned the most and where we sort of got the hang of it. So that's the one we'll be discussing today. I'm gonna use the 5 dimensions Yosu just presented. So very quick recap is that we use 5 dimensions in the project to analyze CEFs to understand how they work. The target investments, the money source, the financial product we offer, the institution managing the CEFs, and how knowledge sharing is arranged. So I'll go by them one by one to see how our example works. And I'm going to start with the target projects. The Development Fund currently focuses on large-scale PV projects on land and wind projects. And the reason why we focus on the development phase of these projects. And the reason for that is that after the Paris Climate Agreement in 2015, we got a Dutch climate agreement in 2019 that came with a lot of support schemes for all kinds of renewable energy projects, for example, feed-in schemes or and such. But we saw that the community energy projects weren't taking off as fast as commercial projects, and we started asking them, okay, but how is that? How does it come? What's the reason? And they quickly came up with the answer that there is a need for development money, that it's hard to finance the development stage of a project because a commercial investor often invest a little bit in 10 development options, and they pick 2 or 3 viable ones, and then they continue developing it. And they kind of average the risk over an entire portfolio of projects. But an energy community often only has 1 project, or if they're lucky, maybe 2 or 3, but they're not able to invest in a bunch of projects and sort of leverage the risk over that. So they said, okay, we need some kind of development funding to get us started. And once we have developed the projects, we can figure out the financing for the building phase ourselves. So that's where we said, okay, let's see if we can set something up to target the development phase of these large projects. And the requirement we have here is that the project needs to be at least 50% community owned. We only finance, obviously, the part of that the community is developing, but the entire project needs to be at least 50% community owned. Otherwise, we don't consider it it's not viable for our fund, because there's not enough citizen participation in it. And we always say we finance from a beer coaster to financial close, which means that you can get a little bit of financing very early on to get the first feasibility studies. But along the way, you can get development financing until you reach financial close. And then you'll pay back your development loan, which brings us to the money source. Where does this money come from? Well, it comes from the government. From the Ministry of Economic and Climate Affairs is half of the budget, and the other half of the budget comes from 4 provincial governments, which means we're also only active in these 4 provinces, which is 1/3 of the country. And they both gave us, all of them gave us a little bit of money, total 8.5 million euros, to fund the development costs of these projects. And currently in the ACE project, one of the things we're doing is trying to expand this to the rest of the country. So in the ACE project, we obviously already have CEFs, but we are now working on expanding this to the entire T of the Netherlands. So the next dimension, the 3rd one, is the product. What do we then actually offer these projects? It sounds amazing, but it is amazing. We offer them risk-free loans. And that's always something, whenever someone with a financial background hear risk-free loans, they're like, that's impossible, you're lying. And we understand that. But what we do is that we offer loans for the development phase. And if your project is successful, so you reach financial close, you pay the loan back with quite a hefty success fee. But if your project doesn't reach that stage, if it fails along the way, you don't have to pay your loan back, so it's waived. And in that way, we create a revolving fund, which in essence means that successful projects pay a little bit more for the development costs, so they can cover the costs of projects that weren't successful. And you can do this because in the Netherlands, the development costs are usually around 5% of the total cost for if you actually build a project. So if you pay a success fee of 50 or even 100%, it's a lot compared to the loan amount, but it isn't that much compared to the total cost of the project. That's why that's possible. And often community energy projects are very willing to pay these kind of success fees, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to develop their project at all. And that way they can kind of create a portfolio effect instead of a commercial developer having their own portfolio of, let's say, 10 projects. We have now a portfolio of 10 projects from 10 different energy communities. So we create kind of the same financial conditions by grouping all these projects in one big portfolio. Another thing this does is the money keeps returning. So the fund revolves, and officially the funding we have from the government is a one-time funding of 8.5 million euros for a period of 20 years. But in that 20 years, this money is going to be spent over and over again. So each time we'll give out loans, and when they're successful, they can come back with a success fee. So this little pot of money of 8.5 million euros keeps being replenished. And the idea is that along the way, it always remains in more or less the same level. So at the end of the 20 years, we should again have 8.5 million euros on our bank account, and we'll see. And then probably we'll do one final round of investments or something. We don't know yet. But that way, with relatively little money from the government, we can have a lot of impact in the coming years. But then the question is, how is that arranged? How do you govern such a steps? And this is a little bit more complex image, which I'm going to try to explain. So the government said, okay, we're willing to give you this money, but we don't want to be part of the complex process of selecting which projects you're going to invest in and checking how it's financially arranged. So they said, okay, we want an extra stakeholder, which is a fund controller, which is a licensed and independent financial body. It's already an existing stakeholder in the Dutch financial market, but they have all the right accreditations to operate in the financial market, and they are the ones that actually control the fund. So the governments are quite far away from the daily workings of the fund. We all do that with our fund controller, and they are the ones who have the money in their bank account, and only when we give out a loan, the money goes to the project. We, on the other hand, Energie Samen, acts as a fund manager. So we do the quality checks on a project. So if a project applies for a loan, we're the ones who say, okay, all the documents you've submitted are of a high enough quality. You can submit for an actual loan, or we say, okay, you have to think a little bit more about this aspect or that aspect before you can actually get the loan. And then obviously on the left side, we have the energy communities who are the applicants for the loan. So we have split the responsibilities in financial responsibilities and responsibilities related to the quality of the projects and investments we do. And the ministry and the government, they only come around once a year to see if everything is going well, and then they say goodbye for another year, and they give the responsibility to the fund control. And yeah, so this is the way we organize the governance of the project. And since Energie Samen is representing energy communities in the country, we are able to always make sure the values of community energy are being respected while operating this fund. And that's why we take the role as fund manager and not the fund controller. Because even though they do, after a couple of years of working with us, understand how energy communities works, they don't have the same inherent intrinsic motivation to keep our values up. So that's why it's split this way. And then the fifth dimension is knowledge sharing. And the knowledge sharing for us is an integrated part of our CEFs. A lot of commercial financial instruments are about finances only, but for us, the CEFs cannot exist without knowledge sharing. And it has to do with risk, and it inherently has to do with risk. Knowledge sharing is the way that we convince the financiers, but also the fund controller, that we can deal with the risk of investment. So how do we do that? We actually split up the development phase in 4 sub-phases. So we say there's a development phase for a project, but you can split them in 4 different phases, where the first phase, initiation phase, is about very simple things like doing a first feasibility study. And the last phase, you're already at the stage, phase 4, where you're already at the stage where you actually get grid connections and permits and such. And we've decided per phase what the activities are and what the milestones are and which deliverables you have to submit to continue to the next phase. And there we offer a lot of help. We provide templates. We also give technical advice and assistance. We have a lot of people in our network with specific expertise who can help a project to arrange a certain or plan for a certain thing. And every time a project wants to go from, for example, phase 1 to phase 2, and also therewith increase their development loan, they have to go to the quality check again. And if they pass, it's great. They go to the next phase, they get a bigger loan. But if they don't pass the quality check, we go and help them to figure out what they need to do to develop their project further. And it also means that in the first phase, you get a little bit of money. It's a maximum 10,000 euros. But each phase you go on, you're able to apply for a higher loan. So the maximum loan amount you can get is a little over 500,000, which is all the 4 phases combined. but the first phase is only 10,000 euros. And that's why we can say from beer coaster to financial close, because you can very easily get your first 10,000 euros in your feasibility studies, but then we help you and guide you to actually get to a feasible project that can reach financial close. And the more you progress through the phases, the higher the investment gets, but also the lower the risk gets, because you have decided on a lot more things. You have got permits at some point. You've got your agreements with your builders at some point. So the risk reduces, but the investment increases. And that way we convinced our investors that we can manage the risks that come with investing in these kinds of projects. Yeah, so that was the five dimensions of our CEFs. And then the question is, what is the results of the CEFs? So we opened in July 2021, so almost 3 years ago. And in 2023, we had 34 projects in our portfolio. So a project usually stays in our portfolio for 2 or sometimes 3 or sometimes even 4 years. So actually last year we had our first project that reached financial close and paid back their loans. And currently we have 34 projects in the portfolio that are in different phases of development. At the moment, there are about 10 projects, 9 or 10 projects in phase 4. So they're nearing financial close, and about 10 in phase 3 as well. And then the rest is in the earlier phases of development. And each of these projects has an estimated development cost of over 500,000. So they're quite large scale projects. But the loans are vary. So some only have loaned 3,000 euros. And after phase 1, they said, okay, the project is not viable and the loan was waived. Others have loaned the maximum amount and are now nearing financial close. And we'll pay back that loan with success fee more or less in the coming year. Yeah, so that's quite successful. And a lot of projects have now been able to be developed because of this funding. And as I said before, in ACE projects, we're doing 2 things actually. We're trying to expand this fund to the other provinces in the Netherlands. But we've also recently, 3 days ago, opened the development fund for district heating, in which we have a total amount of 25 million euros to fund 25 project developments for district heating, a community-owned district heating. So that will be 25 projects completely community-owned that will be developed in the coming years. So yeah, that was our success story, our example. Obviously, we've learned a lot. We have a lot of trial and error, and that's what we're bringing to the ACE project at the moment. So we're hoping that by inspiring you, you will not only set up your own CEFs, but you can also learn from us so that you can do it a little bit better than we did when we first started our CEFs. So thank you for listening. If you have questions, please add them to the Q&A. And I think we'll have a little bit of questions after the other presentations as well. Right, Chris?
Exactly. Thank you very much, Merel. This was very interesting, and I think it really helped to bring alive the concepts that Josu introduced and see how you apply them in practice, at least for the part of the development fund. So excellent. Yes, we will have time for questions, and I would request people who have questions, don't sit on them, write them down in the question section of the. I see they're ticking in now, so keep them coming. Right, so thank you very much, Merel. Then I will present the next speaker. That's Suzanne Renard from Énergie Partagée Investissement. So that's a French organization. Suzanne leads the investment team at Énergie Partagée, where the team consists of 6 people, all professionals who provide advice on finance or on project development finance, and they accelerate the growth of energy community projects in France. Before she joined Énergie Partagée in 2017, Suzanne worked for the French national gas distributor, and she's also worked for Enercop. So yeah, please, Suzanne, go ahead. Suzanne, you're muted. Can you switch on your mic, please?
All right. Yeah, thanks, Chris. So as Energy Salmon in the Dutch Federation for Community Energy, Énergie Partagée is the French Federation of Community Energy Projects in France. So we were founded in 2010, and we have been running this CEFS, Énergie Partagée Investissement, for almost 10 years now. So here are a few highlights of the CEFS. So I will use the same dimensions that Joshu presented and that Meryl used. So first, for what are our target investments? Our targets are any kind of energy community projects that fit into our label. So basically, we finance wind projects, solar projects, biomass, biogas, and hydroelectricity. And the criteria that for our investments are structured around 5 dimensions that are the 5 dimensions that we use widely in France to define what is a community energy project. So there are 12 criteria, and one of the most important one is to have 40% of the capital, so the shares of the project that are owned by citizens. And it could be citizens or local authorities in some projects. But this is one of the cornerstones of our criteria. And then we have like a larger panel of criteria that we need the citizens to be local residents. We are looking for high ambitions on ecology aspects. We're also looking for aspects on the local dynamics, be it people who will be working on the site or for the construction, and also the awareness rising about energy transition and about ecology and let's say cooperation between citizens. And of course, we have criteria on governance. So basically that the governance is shared. So this is the cooperative mindset. If we go, so this is the label is really the key, like the cornerstone aspects of the project that Énergie Partagée Investissement will finance. And then once this step is won and the project is labeled, then we will look into the business case and the business models of the projects, and we will see which one fit into our investment thesis and which ones don't. For the product that we offer, Énergie Partagée Investissement offers equity. So we have our own money that we have raised. It's savings from citizens, so it's not public funding like Énergie Salmon just presented. But we have our own money that we own from citizens, and then we invest this money in equity alongside local sponsors in projects companies. So it can be co-ops, it can be private company. They can be different legal statuses of their energy community projects. And so Énergie Partagée Investissement becomes a shareholder of the projects in partnership with other shareholders. That can be other citizens, that can be local authorities, that can be public-private companies, private developers, and so on. So we don't provide loans, but we provide equity, so shares, and it comes in. Then shareholders can also provide shareholders loans, but it's because we are in the governance of the projects. And so we will. This leads to our revenue stream. So we will gain money from the projects as any shareholders. So it's like dividends, like what the benefits of the projects will go to the part of the benefits of the project that will go to the shareholders. So basically, if we look at this image, we collect savings, we finance, so we bring investment to the projects alongside other citizens, alongside local authorities, alongside other local players. And then this project company will finance the development, the construction of the projects. It will also make all the major choices and decisions for the projects. And then the project will, once it's operating, it will sell its energy, and then the energy sales will make benefits for the project company, and those benefits will make profits for the shareholders, be it local shareholders or be it Énergie Partagée Investissement. And for our money sources, so as I said, we're collecting savings from citizens. So it's a countrywide collect. So it's possible to invest in Énergie Partagée Investissement on our website, or then locally when there are events around the projects, we always have this, paper subscriptions. And roughly we collect 3.5 million euros every year from citizens. We have a goal that every year we will be able to give them a 4% per year return. So it's like a way for them to put their savings not in the bank, but in Énergie Partagée Investissement. And it's the same as Meryl showed for Energy Salmon. Énergie Partagée Investissement is also a revolving fund. So it means that because we put equity in the projects, but we also put shareholders' loans. With time going, some projects, they start to reimburse their loans from the shareholders. So we also collect money from the projects, and that adds to our total money that we can invest in other projects. So far, we have already been reimbursed a few million euros from the projects, and that just make our investment possibilities bigger. So if we go, to a few figures. So far we have 7,400 shareholders. So we have collected 4 million euros from these shareholders that are citizens everywhere. We have invested this 4 million euros in over 135 citizen energy projects. They are all on our website, and they're all technology. So some of them are wind, solar, hydro, biomass, biogas. And as for today, these projects will generate 560 gigawatt hours per hour. And it's these projects that then give benefits to Énergie Partagée Investissement, and then we give return on investment to our shareholders. For our target investments, so mainly we are investing in ready-to-build projects, so the construction phase, which also mean that we need a lot of money to invest in these projects. It's not the beer coaster that Meryl talked about. It's really like construction investments, and almost all of these projects benefit from some kind of feed-in tariff or a support mechanism, and that lowers the risk for our investment, and it gives perspectives on the profits. And to finish, one of the last dimensions is the managing structure. So Énergie Partagée Investissement is part of Énergie Partagée, which is like a movement, and it's meaning that it has different structures, but all of this structures, organizations work together under the common charter that we established in 2010. And there's the same managing directors for all of the staff. For the National Federation, that is an association, And for the cooperative, so Énergie Partagée Cooperative, and then the cooperative operates our different financing tools. So Énergie Partagée Investissement that I just presented, and also Énercité, which is our revolving development fund that we have launched 5 years ago. So we have a little less track record on the development fund than on our investment fund. So basically, for who runs and operate and is at the governance of these organizations. So the association, the National Federation, has 400 members. So it's all the energy citizen, like energy communities or local city councils or different cooperatives. And from these members, there's a board, the board of the association. And for Énergie Partagée Cooperative, we have also a board from some of the citizens that put their savings in Énergie Partagée Investissement, and they also overview the activity of the cooperative. So it's really citizen run and citizen controlled. So these are the 5 dimensions that Chris outlined. And just to finish, I wanted to share with you these figures. Also to emphasize the role of ACCE, a community energy financing scheme, that we do not compete with the local savings or the local investment in cooperatives. So what we see in France, that in the local cooperatives, there are 31,000 citizens that have invested in their local cooperatives, in their local communities, and they have invested for 40 million euros. And we also have some of these same citizens, but also sometimes different citizens that have invested in Énergie Partagée Investissement, either because they don't have a project, where they live, or because they wanted to invest more money with less risk, because we have this portfolio effect that Meryl was also talking about. So these 2 channels of investment in local communities, be it really in the local cooperative or be it through ACCE that then will invest in the project, they really they're not competing, they're cooperating, and we bring things that are different, knowledge that are different from the local cooperatives, and they bring other things. They bring local presence, they bring time, etc. That is it. And yeah, of course, if you have questions, then we'll take them afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. That was very interesting, and it clearly shows a different reality, a different kind of setup, funding a different phase of projects, so which requires a different kind of funding structure. So that's very, very interesting. I see that questions are coming in. Can I ask people that they indicate whether the question is for a specific speaker or whether it is a generic question, so that we know who to direct it to? But keep the questions coming. And I see someone is asking for the presentations. Yes, I assume the presentations will be posted on the ACE website very soon, as well as the video, so people can watch the video later on. So then let's go to our 3rd speaker, Mark Luntley. Mark is from Energy for All in the UK. Mark has sent me an extensive bio, which I had to cut down. Mark, I'm sorry, but you have such an extensive career, both in local government finance and in the creation of community energy, that I couldn't list everything. So at the moment, you are non-executive director at Energy for All, where you focus especially on relationships with the member cooperatives and also international relations. On top of that, you are also a member of the Rescoop EU board. So for those who don't know, Rescoop EU is the federal body that represents all the renewable energy cooperatives across Europe. And you are also a director at ACCE, which is a Belgian cooperative developing financing mechanisms for European community energy. So with such a long track record, we're all looking forward to your presentation. So
Goodness me.
the pressure is on, but I know you can handle it.
Well, can I just say I've followed three fantastic presentations, Josu, Mel, and Suzanne, and it really struck me how many similar points are coming through here. So Energy Salmon with the local-national fund, and I'll be talking about CARES, which sounds very similar, and Energy Partagée with the idea of looking at those variety of projects and different figures. Anyway, I'm going to do it slightly differently. You talked about the things I'm a director of. I wanted to start with this picture. Can you see my presentation? This is the other two things I'm involved with, and that is two energy for all projects. The one in the background is a wind farm. Some people have actually been on this call have been round it actually, and that was pretty much the first community-owned wind farm in the south of England. In fact, it's pretty well the only community-owned wind farm in the south of England because of government policy. And the solar park was one of the largest, if not the world's largest, community-owned solar park when we acquired it in 2012. And that picture there is of all of us celebrating when we actually bought it into community ownership. The landowner, who's the guy and woman in the front there in yellow, gave permission for it to be built, but only on the basis that community could actually buy it. And so that was a £15 million project. And the wind farm was a 15-year battle to make it work. And it was pretty much the first energy for all project. And it was so hard, it was almost the last energy for all project. But I thought I'd just talk a little bit about some of the challenges in the UK. I always like saying this, there is no shortage of money in the UK. The problem is there's a shortage of projects, good projects that are ready when the community's got the money, rather than projects that are there when the developers who've got the money just come in and do it. The planning process in the UK is incredibly slow, and it's a little bit like, as Merel was saying earlier, if you're a developer, you just spread the cost of failure over the successful one. You've got 20 projects, doesn't matter if 4 go wrong, you just spread it over the others. If you're a community, you've got one project, and that's why communities don't get off the ground. And of course, it's your first project often, so you're up against somebody who's got the money and done it a dozen times before. So of course, that's why it's much harder for communities. What I describe, and I use the phrase Westminster government because energy is a devolved matter in the UK, so there are very different approaches in Scotland. The Westminster government is somewhere between uninterested and hostile. Why is it uninterested? Because they tend to be interested in very big projects, offshore wind, and they sort of think of community energy as a village hall, and they try and sort of steer community energy towards village hall, which we try and resist. Because if you're just the village hall, basically the whole energy system is being kept with the existing players, and that's not what we want to do. And what EcoPower and some Energia and Goyna Energy and so many others have done, and Enercop, is to actually challenge that, and that's what we're trying to do in the UK. It's not helped by the fact that in the UK we have frequent policy shifts. So onshore wind has been banned. It's been unbanned, it's been banned again, and it's been unbanned in the space of 3 months. So it's just like, how can you make any sort of choices? And it doesn't help as well that we can't access EU funding for reasons are obvious, and I will, for this talk, resist any discussion of, but it also has a danger that you actually lose contact with what's happening elsewhere, so that you end up in this child-adult relationship rather than citizens looking and working to each other. One of the other big problems, which is a bit like the shortage of money, is pipelines. So by that, I mean commercial developers, sort of in the UK, if you're a big developer, you want a sort of £100 million, because the sort of due diligence on 100 million is sort of the same as the due diligence on 10 million or 1 million. So of course you want to do it on 100 million because it's, you know, you've got 90 million more benefit for one set of due diligence. And of course we haven't got a £100 million project. Actually we do, I'll come on to that in a minute. So that's one of the problems. And the other part of it is, even if you haven't got 100 million, if you've got 10 million now, 10 million then, 10 million then, 10 million, that's sort of doable. But the challenge is, if you look at Energy for All, we've had a bit of a gap for 2 years, and now we're trying to do 3 or 4 projects. So it's a lumpy pipeline, as I would, if you can have a lumpy pipeline. And the final thing is actually increasingly commercial investors are moving to using professional fund managers. So there's an unwelcome move where, for example, pension funds are becoming ever bigger on the basis that's more efficient. That's fine. But actually, what it does mean is there's now an intermediate layer of professional investors who have no understanding of what community energy is and no interest. So what that's really said is we need to be doing more as citizen movement, which is why we're looking so hard at things like ACCE, for example. So a little bit about the Energy for All development model, if I can. So on the left is a tree. Tree keeps getting bigger. Sometimes it grows a lot, then sometimes it doesn't. This is a 1-year-old tree, I think. So it's a bit out of date. But the first project was Baywind, which was a Swedish co-op that came over and tried to make that work. And then they withdrew. And the Baywind people created Energy for All back in the 90s and actually have grown Energy for All. Partly because Suzanne was making the point, I thought I'd just quickly look up the numbers. So we've raised about £90 million of equity over these years. We have about 19,000 members. Now, some people are members of several co-ops, so it's not 19,000 individual people. Interestingly, Energy for All also puts quite a bit of interest in what sort of organisation we are. So the salary ratio is 3 to 1. So the highest paid person owns no more than 3 times the lowest paid person. And it's got a ratio of 20 women to 9 men, and it's led by a woman, and it has a balanced board. So we try and sort of deliver other things. And if you look at our annual report, which is available on all good ResCoop reunions, and you will see that in there that we also measure ourselves, for example, against things like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the 7 cooperative principles. So just a little bit of that central graph and what's the Energy for All model. If you start at the top, we basically work with communities to identify projects. So there'll be a lot of projects that are sort of never get anywhere, but we will sit down with communities and we'll go through that sort of process that Meryl was talking about, the starting small and working up. What is this project really going to happen? And we will create co-ops where we think a project can be developed. We support the co-ops to raise the money and then build the project. So we bring that expertise. So there's a local board with an Energy for All representative, typically. So we build the project and then we help the people manage it. We get paid a development fee if it's successful and not if it's not. And interestingly, every new project then becomes a member and owner of Energy for All. So who owns Energy for All? It's the member co-ops who we create. So now we've got about 38 sort of shares and sort of about 35 owners. And then the last picture just shows where they are. And you'll see there's a lot more hydro. For those of you who've been to Scotland, you'll know why. There's a lot more hydro and wind power in Scotland, and there's a bit more sunshine power in England. So that's the sort of the model. And then I just thought I'd just say a little bit about the UK community energy sector. So this is a graph from Community Energy England, but it's actually of the whole of the UK. There is a group called Community Energy Scotland, which develops the CARES project, which I'll speak about in a minute. But you will see there that there are about 58,000 members of energy co-ops across the UK. We've got about 68 megawatts of capacity. So we generate about 500 gigawatts of electricity. So sort of not dissimilar to Énergie Partagée. We installed 7.5 megawatts, i.e. not very much last year, or a couple of years ago. And we've got 90 low carbon transport projects. Mostly you'll see it's in renewable energy. We spend most of the Energy for All projects give a return to their members and also give a return to the community. And you'll see there about community income spent locally, about 15 million. Interestingly enough, Westmill Solar, that project on the first page, that picture of the solar farm, has given about £1.3 million in community benefit since we started. And you look at the private developers, and they give pretty much, nothing. They'll build a new community centre solar roof. So Yosu's sort of graph of the ladder of community involvement with sort of, I can't remember what the bottom one was, but it's pretty much, there's an awful lot of ones in that bottom one there. And I would always say there's a difference, and ResCube says there is a difference between community ownership and community benefit. And private developers are always trying to talk about community benefit. We're always trying to talk about community ownership. That's what we need to create. So where does the money come from? This is across the UK. And you'll see that England, Scotland, Wales, and there's not very much in Northern Ireland. We do actually have a project in Northern Ireland, but there's only one. England, you'll see much of it comes from a variety of different sources. There's a local authority funding now, and there's some really interesting work. But look at Scotland. Nearly all of the Scottish funding comes from CARES. What does CARES stand for? Community, I can't remember, and Renewable Energy Scotland. But it's basically the same system as Merrill was talking about. So I won't repeat it, but basically, if it's successful, it's a loan. If it isn't successful, it's a grant. And Energy for All has worked with the CARES programme, and several of our hydro projects just would never have been able to be developed without that CARES funding to do a lot of the hydrological studies that you need. Because as you'll see in a minute, the ladder of complexity that I'm going to show, there are some of those projects I do that are pretty complicated. And my advice, if you're starting off with a community project, is start with some of the easier ones. So anyway, there you go. There's Big Lottery, there's the Welsh Government. Some local authorities in the UK have done some interesting work. In Oxford City, where I used to work, they created a really innovative local authority funding project. So the council gives a loan to the local community energy group, and then they go and build something, and then they raise the money, and it's much easier to raise the money when you can take people around and show them, and then they pay the council back, and then the council lends the money again. It's a revolving fund. So what's the sort of funding types and what I've called development? So there's the CARES loan, which Merrill has talked about, and the Oxford City revolving fund, which I've just talked about. We also have a model in Edinburgh where we have community groups and the council in a long-term partnership, and the council provides sites. So they did an ODU tender about 5 years ago, and they said, we will, as a result of that, we want to work with the local community energy group, and they have done now 3 share offers in that city, targeting citizens in Edinburgh to actually raise money, put solar panels on public buildings, including the council building, actually. Of course, that meant Glasgow wants to do the same because Glasgow, hates being outshone by Edinburgh, so Glasgow wants to do it now. And the other thing that we've done because of the problems of actually accessing funding is we have one energy co-op that's called Energy Prospects that we raised, one of our 33 projects. And that is actually an internal revolving fund, and we help that. And we also increasingly use inter-co-op loans. We worked out, I think I sort of pointed out once, that we've got our co-ops, and the older they are, the more money they build up. And these co-ops had millions of pounds in the bank, and the other co-ops were borrowing millions of pounds from the same bank. That's, why don't we just cut the bank out and just lend it direct, obviously. So anyway, and that's sort of some of what we're trying to do a little bit with MeSize. And then in terms of investments, we have community shares capped at €5 million, or the sterling equivalent, typically 25 years. We've increasingly used bonds in some places. Bonds can be held in tax-free wrappers, unlike community shares, which can't. And as interest rates have risen and the taxes has tightened, that's actually made it less attractive to raise funds from community shares because people, if you put money into a commercial fund, you put money into community energy, you will actually end up probably paying more tax on your community energy. So I think there's an issue there. We have loans, some commercial or ethical or a bit of both. And interestingly enough, we have also had support, not so much these days, but support from the cooperative movements of mid-counties, who are one of the big regional retail co-ops, were really instrumental in supporting Westmill in the early days. So final thought, I'm doing another presentation in a couple of days' time, and I just thought I'd add this in hence it's not quite as professional as all the other slides here, but I would just point out, if you're thinking of your early projects, there's a ladder as far as I can see it, and the easiest sort of thing to do is ground-mounted PV. I mean, it's not easy, but it's easier. You've still got to think of security and PPAs. You've got to think of equipment and guarantees and suppliers and maintenance and so forth. But you don't have the problem of the licenses and roof access and all the rest if you go for a roof. Onshore adds levels of complexity to do with planning. And then the further down you go, the more complicated it gets. I would say that hydro is actually quite challenging because there's lots of moving parts. I'd be interested in whether Suzanne would agree with this, but we have really struggled with hydro projects. There's either too much rain or there's not enough. And you'd think if there's a load of rain, you think, oh, must be great. But actually, the gap in the water drop isn't enough. And then when obviously there's not enough rain, well, that's obviously a problem. And then there's biomass, and we have district heating. And finally, I'd say energy saving is really challenging. It's really important, but actually it's really quite challenging to do energy savings. And the co-ops in the UK have just really struggled to do that. So then my final couple of slides, I want to finish with a sort of philosophical thing, is it's really what Yuzu was saying at the start. It is really important everybody is lined up. And my advice would be take more time planning at the start rather than jumping in and then having to plan retrospectively. That's always more expensive and difficult. Have the right structure. Quite often people choose the easy structure to have, like, a charity, and then find it's not a charity. It's actually a distributing, profit-making organization, and you're sort of trying to back engineer what you're doing, which is difficult. And do have the support and involvement. Make sure that the people who are supporting you have got the same interests as you. So that's really important. And finally, I think the point that both Meryl and Suzanne have said about sharing that information. We've just supported a co-op development officer to really try and not only develop things, but actually embed those 7 cooperative principles. And I thought I'd finish with this slide. Now, this slide is not just here because the project leader of ACE, Stan, is the guy in yellow in the middle. He's clearly not got enough clothes on for the event. But it's actually, it was a really difficult morning. We were talking about me-size, and there was a group, so we had a difficult morning. Some people were frustrated with how it was going. But all of us on the me-size project went out for a walk at lunchtime just to sort of clear our heads. And we stopped. And I sort of joked and said, look, it's an EU project. We should all point in different directions, because that's a sort of like, so you could actually, if you look, you'll notice everybody's pointing, you've got a finger pointing here, there, and everywhere. And Enacop in the form of, is pointing completely off the side there. And Maël. But there is a serious point to this. This brings together French and American and Belgian and Spanish and Dutch, all sorts of nations here. And that's working together on the climate emergency, one of the most important things that we face. And you'll see the signs there, and those signs are because it's right on the border of Belgium and Germany. And 70, 80 years ago, young people weren't working together. They were fighting and dying on these borders. And so what we've created with ResCoop, with me-size, with these projects, with the European Union, who are co-founding this, for me is as important as all these other things. It's about a fair energy transition. So this picture I always use because I love it, because it is about people working together for a common purpose, and that's what we're about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. Knowledgeable and inspirational as always. We're so lucky to have you. Thank you very much. So now we've heard from our 3 interesting speakers. I see that we've had a number of questions coming in, and a lot of them have been responded already. We will briefly do a recap when we have time, but I would like to have a couple of questions before we go to the audience questions. So when we compare these 3 examples, so they all have different emphasis, they have a different national reality, they have a different structure, but and you've all been running for a number of years, and my question would be, if you were to start again, if you were, had to do it all over again, what would you not repeat? What would you change? And what would be the most important advice that you would give someone else who were to start on this? So we'll take turns. We'll start first with Merel, and then again Suzanne and Mark. Mark, you've got time to think. Yes.
Well, I have multiple answers, but I'll stick to the development fund specifically. There are 2 things I think we would want to change. One is that we now have the ministry and 4 provincial governments funding it, which makes that we have 5 funders, which is more complex than it should be. So ideally, when we do this again, we would only have the ministry, or if the governments or the provincial governments want to invest as well, that's fine. But then we would ask them to send money to the ministry and still give us 1 source of money instead of 5 different sources of money. That's one thing. The other thing is that is mostly the fund administration. When you take on an activity like this, it asks for a different type of administrative work than for just running your cooperative, and that's something we underestimated in the beginning. And one of the things we'll also in the ACE project discuss with the partners now setting up a CEF. Don't underestimate that. Make sure all your bookkeeping is in order, that your bookkeeping is separate from the bookkeeping of the rest of the organization, because there's a lot more money flowing through it. So there's a lot of practical learnings there, that we created a great concept, but we weren't necessarily ready for the practical implications. Now, in the past 1.5 years, we've done a lot of improvements. We've created different systems for it to work, and it runs very smoothly. But the first year, we made a little bit of a mess.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, I think mistakes are easily made, but it's only the good ones that are able to learn from it and rectify. So well on people from Energy Salmon for this. Suzanne, are you willing to also share your mistakes with us?
Sure. I think at the beginning, Énergie Partagée Investissement was also co-founded by la Nef, which is which is the ethical bank in France, and the Énergie Partagée Association, the national federation, was really coming up from the first, pioneers of energy communities, and they were seen as two different tools or two different structures. And very quickly on, we worked on having like the same managing directors, having the same team, and really, saying we're working in the same direction. All the a lot of the knowledge management part is also made or piloted by the association. But still, there's this image sometimes that the association and the federation, national federation, and Énergie Partagée Investissement is looking for return on investment for citizen savings. And this is sort of like a perception that people have. It's not how we work, because we as a team, we really work together and do a lot of cross training, knowledge management, and so on. But I think it's important that the CEFS is really seen as a tool for energy communities and not only as a financing tool, because we don't provide only finance, but sometimes we're seen through this financing lens, and I think it's missing part of the image, and then we have to explain it a lot, and it takes energy that we would put somewhere else, for a better benefit.
Yeah. Okay.
And for the advice, that was your second question, right?
It's all in one, but yeah, you can give some advice as well. Yes.
Yeah, for the advice, I think that it's really important to start with a pipe of projects, so that to gain hands-on experimentation from the beginning. We learn so much on the projects that it's really important to have this on the ground reality check from the very early beginning.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. Mark, you've had time and ample experience, so I'm sure you will come up with, you'll give us something valuable.
I think when we created Energy Prospects, the idea was it was going to invest in projects and take a share, and so it become a mini fund. But it was probably, and it's been successful in its own way. It actually lends money now, and then it gets money back. It probably didn't do what we anticipated that it would have done at the start. And that's probably because it was just a little bit too small. So I think there's a bit there about, and it comes back to what Merle was saying about it couldn't spread its risk widely enough. So it probably needed to be a little bit bigger. And I think if I were, and this is very much personal views, I'm not sure if my board would agree with me, it is being recorded, so I can't unsay it. We have created a lot of co-ops, and that has the advantage that there's a lot of democratic involvement right at that ground level. But it does create quite a large governance cost as well, because for every co-op, there's an annual meeting, there's an annual return, there's sets of accounts. So there's a balance there, I think. And maybe we might do a little bit of what Suzanne, and I think it was Suzanne was saying with Énergie Partagée, and having a sort of fund that develops and people go through that and develop on, rather than in every case having little projects. And we've sort of addressed that now, because one of our big projects called the Schools Co-op is actually a bit more like that. And there's now 100 projects in the Schools Co-op, whereas some of the others are actually quite small ones there. And one of the learning as well, I'd say, is one of the things that's worked really well has been a partnership. So a partnership with something used to be called Folk Renewables and is now called Renantis. And they actually have been fantastic partners for us. And I didn't talk about it. I said I was, but I didn't. The offshore projects, where we've got 4 offshore projects, And that's actually partly on the back of the fact that we had our long-term partnership with Volt-Renantis, and that grew into that there. So
They're
choose
an
the
engineering partner, right? Just to make that,
yeah.
Mhm.
So the idea of having the right partners early on and choosing the people who share your values, and they really are a fantastic organization that shares our values. Italian in origin, as I understand it.
Mhm. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, thank you, everyone. I see that again that all the questions from the audience have been responded by the individual people. Maybe if we look at that Simon Thébault's question, so about crowd lending, I see both Meryl and Suzanne have replied. Could you maybe just explain in 30 seconds your response so that we share it with everyone here?
Yeah. So the question in short was, does crowd lending happen to supplement the development costs? And the answer is yes, it does, especially in the later phases of development. A lot of times they crowd lend a part of the development cost. In fact, they need to at least do 20 and sometimes 25% of the development cost needs to be financed by the cooperative themselves. But there are two ways or more, but two common ways. One is crowd lending, and the other one is that we also count voluntary hours from, for example, the board of an energy community for a fixed commercial tariff as own contribution of the energy community. So in the earlier phases, you see that the volunteer hours make up enough money that it's fictional because it's volunteer hours, but we on paper enough money to make their own contributions. And in the later phases, often they do a little bit of crowd lending amongst their members.
Thank you. Suzanne, do you want to add to that, please?
Sure. For us, we make a difference between crowd lending, like on a platform from citizens who are not involved in the capital, in the governance, and shareholders loans. So it's when a citizen has taken shares in their co-ops or in Énergie Partagée Investissement, and will add extra, like make an extra loan to their energy projects. So basically, there's a lot of shareholders loans in the energy community that we finance, but they rather don't go for crowd lending, because crowd lending would mean only financial apport, bringing some finances to the projects and not being involved in the governance. And really in energy communities, what we want is that people are involved in the governance, that they have their say on what is the project. So we don't really go with crowd lending from platforms, but there's a lot of loans from the citizen stakeholders.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, that's it also goes back to what Mark says about the participation and the involvement has to be real, not just a monetary involvement, right?
Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah. The next question was by Marcella, and it's been answered by Suzanne. It's about the minimum investment for shareholders. So Suzanne has answered to that. Maybe I could ask for a follow-up question, because Suzanne replied that the minimum of one share started at 100 euros, but every time the value is adjusted every year, I understand, and now it's up to 123 euros. Does that create a risk of speculation also, or how do you manage that, Suzanne?
So because the value of the share is adjusted every year, it is a way to give the 4% return on savings that we advocate. So it's not speculation, it's the rate that we have been working for over the years. What would be speculation, for instance, is to give dividends. So to take the money out of Énergie Partagée Investissement, what we rather do is we tell citizens, there's value that has been created thanks to your money, and the value is still is taken in the fund. But once that you will want to have your money back, then your money will have gained value as well. So we're rather having the share that gains value more than distributing dividends. This year we decided to distribute dividends, but that the first year, and still there's more on the share than on dividends. So it's it's like passion capital, and we also ask our shareholders, like Énergie Partagée Investissement shareholders, to stay at least 10 years, because the investment in projects takes time, and this is not going to be a quick win financial investment, but it will be a long-term win-win financial investment.
That's clear. I also noticed that with about 8,000 private investors and 40 millions available, that means the average outlay of people is like 5,000 euros, more or less, right? So people buy multiple shares, clearly. Okay. I don't know whether Merel or Mark want to say anything more about this, whether they have insights on this that are different.
I would just add that in the UK, it's actually completely the reverse from what Suzanne was saying, where the shares keep at the same value, and the FCA, our regulator, watches that very carefully. And then, but the amount that we can give as a return is also fairly carefully managed, and it has to be sufficient to attract and retain capital. We haven't used crowdfunding for the same reasons that others have said. I would say I think there's a real challenge for the cooperative movement, certainly in the UK. If we did a survey of Westmill Solar and Wind members, 50% of them are age 60 or over, 65 or over. So there is a sort of and that's one of the cooperative principles about diversity in terms of age of members. And our members tend to be people who've got a reasonable amount of money, and they can lock it up for a length of time, as you'd say. So there's a sort of challenge about how do we create ways to actually attract people in the sort of millennial generation to actually be able to put their money in and participate in the same way. And so we're sort of trying to think about how we design things to do that. So we haven't got the answers yet.
No. Okay, thank you. A couple of people have asked about the presentations or the audio. We will not send out individual presentations as such. I assume, Yosu, we will send an email with a link as soon as the presentations are up on our website. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So all people who have registered will receive an email with a link from where they can download the documentation in a couple of days' time, and then you can share it to anyone you would like. We're running out of time, so I would have liked to, but no, I see it's coming up to almost 1:30. So fortunately, all the questions have been answered in the chat. So I would like to thank once again all the speakers, Merel, Suzanne, Mark, and Yosu. Also my colleague Pablo for doing the behind the screens work here today, and the rest of the people in the ACE project for preparing all this. This is only the first webinar. We're Yosu, you're smiling. Have I forgotten something? No. Okay.
No, sorry.
Right. Okay. No, so it's the first webinar. We're expecting 2 more. One that will focus on the content of the toolbox that Yosu has introduced. That will be sometime during the summer of this year. And then there's a 3rd webinar coming up after the summer in autumn, where we will focus more on the replication potential. So if you want to build your own CEFs in your region or in your country, how to start, how to start, that will be the focus of the 3rd webinar. I think we can wrap up. Thank you again for everyone who attended. Thank you for your interest. Thank you again for all the speakers, and hope to see you in the near future. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Were you okay with all that? So, yeah.
Great, Mark. Very well. Thank you very much.
Take care. Have a lovely time. See you very soon. See you
See
in
you soon. See you next week. Yeah.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
bye.